I'm proud to be here to represent Marco. He's an old friend of mine, and he wanted me to come speak on his behalf today. I'm the lead sponsor of a bill to try to curtail the spread of fentanyl and its reaches in this country. We have the largest, in my district, we have the largest county of fentanyl distribution in the country. So he asked me to speak on his behalf, and he was in a town hall meeting earlier today speaking about painkiller addiction, heroin, fentanyl, and the like. And basically, what Senator Rubio has laid out is a two-track problem/solution. And I was listening to the panel here before, and a lot of it had been spoken, but really it comes down to law enforcement and then treatment. And what Marco has talked about is that with law enforcement, trying to figure out who are the bad guys, whether they be the drug cartels that we talked about, who are trying to supply some of these drugs illegally through various channels, whether it's across the borders, or in the case of Florida, as we saw, these pill mills with doctors who were prescribing copious amounts of painkillers. People were driving from all over the country down to my state. You'd go to these pill mills and you'd literally see license plates from all over the country in Canada because of how easy it was to get OxyContin and the like in Florida until we cracked down. Law enforcement, our Attorney General, and our government, our legislature went from having the top 10 pill mill distributors in the country to having none. So there is a role for government and there is a role for law enforcement in trying to figure out who the bad actors are and how to stop it. Marco's talked a little bit about this also with regard to the legalization of marijuana, differentiating between medical and recreational, and how that may come into play as far as other drugs are concerned, and why he's been probably a little tougher than most when the trend seems to be going towards legalizing recreational marijuana and what implications that could have on the things that we're talking about here today. But the other more important part, and I think one that's more personal to me, deals with the other half of this issue, and that's who the victims are. And treating people that become addicted to painkillers, heroin, and fentanyl not as criminals, but as victims, and how we're going to give them the help that they need. Again, here again is where the government has a role, and deals in large part with allowing some of the programs that have been very successful to be able to have the adequate funding that they need to be able to address this problem. I'm an appropriator, sit on a committee which basically doles out your tax dollars to programs like the ones that we've heard about all over the country. And you can't just bury your head in the sand and say, well, I'm a conservative and these things will be worked out without the help of the government. If there are men and women and children who become addicted to this problem, it affects the entire community. It's a community problem. And the community has a role in helping. I saw this recently. My son plays football. He's in 8th grade. He's a quarterback, and they won the county championship. I'll just put that plug in there. But about halfway through the season, he broke his nose, and we went to the emergency room. He's 13 years old. And I was a little bit shocked that when we were leaving there, the doctor in the ER gave us a prescription for Percocet. And she told me to give this to him. And I'd have back surgery, so I know what these things do to you or how they make you feel. And I'm just thinking to myself how easy it was for him for a broken nose. I mean, he's going to have to deal with it and deal with some pain, but eventually, like everybody else. I just don't remember growing up when we'd go to the emergency room for the things that we go to the emergency room for, my mom or dad giving me a painkiller that was going to alter the way that I felt and the way my brain worked. So certainly there's a lot of responsibility to go around, but I think at my level, at the federal level and even at the state and local levels, we need to have a serious conversation, a serious look about what is considered just okay to do. Needless to say, I did not fill that. His coach showed up too. He's like, "You're not filling that prescription, are you?" I'm like, "Absolutely not. He's going to take Advil." And I know this, and this is what I wanted to just share with you, if I could briefly, is my family deals like a lot of families with addiction. And I have 6 brothers and sisters, and 3 of them have had struggles with painkillers or alcohol to the point where they don't do those things anymore, including my father. So we're like every other American family, where I have siblings that have gone in and out of rehabs, have been fighting addiction for their whole life. My one brother, who I just texted before I came on here today and asked him if it was all right if I used him as an example, and he said it's no secret, and that's part of the recovery process. He'd been in and out of over 30 rehabs for addiction. And when I think about my children and our children, where does it start? When does that onset, when does that light go on? Is it the first Percocet that you take? Does your body say that this is something that I need to live? Or is it something that just helps with the pain for now, and then when the prescription runs out, I'll be done with it? Because if, like with so many people, it happens immediately or within that first prescription, then you're going to have to go get another prescription. And then when you can't, and if a doctor says, okay, you're done with the prescriptions, and people are addicted, what do they do then? Well, they got to go find it from somewhere else. And that's when we have, as you all know, I don't need to preach to the choir here, but that's when we get into the illegal part of it and trying to curb the bad actors, whether it be through heroin or what have you, or illegal painkiller distribution and the like. So I just worry about what is our role at the federal level in trying to change the culture of an ER doctor giving a 13-year-old a prescription of Percocet to the point where my son, who's 13, could turn into my brother in and out of rehabs 30 times. He didn't want to be in and out of those rehabs. He certainly doesn't want to be living the life that he's probably wasted over 30 years of his life because of a drink that he took when he was younger. But it came home for me to understand that it just took a certain amount of alcohol and a certain amount of painkillers for them and their body to feel like they needed it all the time. And not just something you could do casually, occasionally, and then when a prescription runs out or when the party's over, you can just stop. It's a disease. And one thing that my dad always reminds me is just because you're 45 years old doesn't mean you're out of the woods yet. He didn't really feel like it became a problem and took it over his life until he was about my age. And he had been drinking casually well up until then. So this is an ongoing issue. We as Republicans and Democrats, as politicians, as moms and dads, have a responsibility to find out what we can do with that ER doctor, who are the bad actors. And that ER doctor wasn't doing anything illegal, but it's a cultural, it's a moral, and it's as we are in this building, a place of worship, a religious obligation that we have as Americans to try to solve the problem. And on behalf of Marco, I know that part of his new American century that he talks about is not just looking at the bad actors. Yeah, we can build the wall as big as we can, try to stop the bad things coming in from Mexico and elsewhere, but we have to help the victims and not treat them as criminals and shame them into going into the shadows in this next new American century. So I will say just 2 other things that we are working on at the federal level, and that deals with veterans. I'm the chairman of the Caucus for Invisible Wounds, which deals a lot with post-traumatic stress disorder and terminal brain injury. I can't tell you how many veterans come home and they have serious brain injury or other injuries and need probably help at a psychological level or medication that doesn't necessarily revolve around pain, but guess what? A lot of these people are being prescribed painkillers for mental issues. And that's why you see the rate of our veterans committing suicide higher than it's ever been in this country's history. That's a cultural problem, and that's something that needs to be addressed as we move forward as a country. And we're trying to do that on our committee. The last thing I'll just say is this, and again, I thank you all for staying and listening, and hopefully, some good comes out of it. But I've been around addicts and alcoholics and people that are addicted my whole life, in my family and my friends, as have you in the audience. And there is one common bond. And I'm a Catholic. I know this isn't a Catholic church, but there is one common bond that I do see with a lot of people that beat their disease. And that is the recognition that there is a higher power and that there is something greater than themselves that's helping them get through their troubles. If I meet somebody that's an addict that got clean just on their own, I would say that's a very, very small minority. Most of the people, including my father, who have become clean, almost drive you crazy with not just the 12-step program, but their reliance on faith and the fact that God is leading them away from the things that they were addicted to. So all these things are important, not least of which is God. So I think that all this is important. I was glad to see and read how many presidential candidates are talking about this issue, especially in New Hampshire. I know it's hit here especially hard, but this is an issue that's not going away, and this is an issue that needs to be addressed now. And so thank you very much for letting me come and speak with you.